everyone, and thank you very much. Okay, so I think wait for that quiz, this thing to come in as well. So good morning, everyone, once again. Thank you for joining us today in the morning for this particular webinar. And I'm actually truly very privileged. I think I've been wanting to do this particular topic, and we want to discuss this particular topic for a long time. We had multiple lockdowns, multiple ease of lockdowns, and then again, today we kind of have made peace with the current situation, and we are trying to live with it and make the most out of it. And what is really exciting is that I really do have some three panelists here today who have immense amount of experience and wealth of knowledge to share. And I think we are very, very blessed that we have actually been able to get that time to conduct this webinar. So for everyone who's listening, welcome to the webinar. Please do feel free to put your questions, your clarifications with us, and I think that will help us to construct the conversations a lot more. But as you would have seen from the registrations, that we are currently talking a little bit about the booms and the busts in ecom. I'll just provide a bit of a context. I mean, I think about 2 years ago, I completely lost track of this situation now. When the COVID happened, suddenly, we went into lockdown. We were all living at home, and suddenly all the companies, organizations had to scramble to get their digital and online sorted out so that they were able to still maintain and supply for the demand that is out there. We as consumers have to get used to, people who have never shopped online, certain product ranges, certain services, have to get comfortable ordering it. We actually have weathered a lot of very, let's say, less than ideal customer experiences online until the organization picked their game up and kind of survived through this. But today, we are in a really interesting place where a lot of organizations over the last 12 months or so have invested heavily on building their digital capacity and capability and built it. And now we are also on a post-lockdown where there's a debate about, are we still going to see the same demand, or have we invested this money and resources, etc., to build this, or are we going to see a much, much longer return than what we anticipated during the lockdown? So there's always this interesting debate. The organization standpoint, you have a physical engagement sometimes, then you have an online demand that is spiking when the lockdowns come in, and the supply chain needs to do a lot of gymnastics on maintaining that demand and supply, and I think to adapt that. So today I have three very esteemed panelists, Nilusha, Aruni, and Niranka. I think all of you who are wondering, I'm pretty sure that you have already gone through their LinkedIn profiles. I've seen their profile, as I said, decades of experience in this space, and talking about how we are going to manage this. So dear panelists, thank you very much for joining. Let me just start this first round of discussion with maybe a little bit of opening remarks from all three of you. Let me come to you, Aruni. Would like to hear from you, and I would just like to disclose that Aruni is based in Indonesia. She looks after H&M. I think very interesting to see international and probably a different geography, different regions kind of take on this particular topic. Aruni, what do you think?
So yes, even in Indonesia, if you take that perspective, most of the companies, of course, were already online. They managed to take the advantage. But then there were some companies and some brands that were not online, and this entire COVID situation pushed them to go online. And I saw that happen with Sri Lanka as well. What I can say is, considering how things are moving right now, online business is something that is going to grow. And this I'm saying even pre-COVID, as someone who was in the e-commerce business, we saw growth in e-commerce pre-COVID as well. And now with most of the consumers switching from offline to online, I think it's all about a habit creation. So we need to understand how to sustain this habit and how to move forward. And the other very important aspect is most organizations, this is from my personal experience, especially when they are performing extremely well in offline, they expect the same kind of performance in online as well. the fast performance. Because when you open a brick and mortar store or a supermarket for that matter, the customers just, come to it without any advertising sometimes. Because you can see the road when you're passing on the road, you know that a supermarket is there, a retail establishment is there. But for online business, it takes more time to build the business. So you have to have a different opinion or different aspect when you go to online, and have that understanding that online is not going to shoot up drastically. It's not going to grow overnight. It's a matter of growing month by month. And if you can see the month by month growth, I think that is where you know that this is a sustainable business.
Interesting, Aruna. I think you already shared some very interesting topics I would like to explore more. Obviously, we'll get there. Nilusha, over to you. I'd love to hear you. And I'm sure that a lot of people have a lot of questions because you are here and you are in the thick of things for the last 2 years.
So Rohan, before I start, let me just maybe introduce myself a little bit as well. Pre-pandemic, I would like to think that I was skeptic of e-commerce shopping. And I think I can safely call myself now a converted e-commerce shopper, maybe a partial converted e-commerce shopper. So I lead a team of very talented individuals in the marketing team at Kia Supermarkets. And it has been a very interesting and enlightening period of time going through, particularly the last 1.5 years. I think I echo the same sentiments that Aruni just mentioned. Customer behaviors, lifestyles, priorities are evolving at a rapid pace. So being on top of that is super important to be able to understand what you want to offer on your e-commerce platform. A lot of research also states that we've seen over 3 to 4 years worth of digital transformation over the last 1.5 years, and people are just scrambling to figure out what it is that they want to do. So it is a challenging time that we are in, but I'd also like to look at it as a glass half full, which means there's so much opportunity to kind of rethink and reimagine and rewrite that customer experience as to what you want it to be in the future. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting discussion.
I like to know a lot more about why you say it's half full and half empty, what that really entails as well. Niranka, just to disclaim, is that Niranka is the co-founder and of Antara Solutions and one of my closest friends. Niranka, over to you.
Thanks, Rohan. So as coming from the agency side, we actually see both sides of the coin, right? So having to drive the numbers for our clients and the conversations that we have to have with our clients also about going online, right? And still surprisingly, sometimes we move from lockdown to lockdown, right? This website is like super urgent. It's not urgent anymore, right? We'll wait a bit longer and get it just right. We see those aspects as well. But I think primarily what I'm most concerned about in the context of brand performance is that the shift to online became a necessity for a lot of people when they had no other choice, right? And you had to go online to get your groceries, basically everything you had to do online since you were confined to home. But the reality is how pleasant the user experience was that. Did you actually enjoy shopping online? Would you want to do it again if you now had the choice of physically walking into a store? And how do we maintain that momentum in the context of the user experience, and how do we continuously cater to the evolving demands of that user is kind of what I'm hoping we can talk about today, because we are still seeing that the investments and conversations about online also tend to be a little sporadic based on the need of the hour, which is there's a lockdown and we have to go online.
Interesting. Thank you, Niranka. So thanks a lot, dear panelists. And I think there were some interesting points made. We'd love to explore a bit more. So let me kind of open up a few questions here, and I think set some context and get understanding here. Nilusha, I think there is obviously going to be a lot more questions coming your way, but let me just first come to Aruni. Aruni, like one of the things what really fascinates about the kind of a role and the way you are is you are in one of the most populous countries, right? I mean, Indonesia is obviously, I think if I'm not mistaken, some 250 million population compared to, well, 20 million in Sri Lanka. And I think because you are originally from Sri Lanka, one of the things I'd like to hear is that offline behavior, online behavior, do you see major shifts and changes or subtle changes in where you operate today? And would you like to just explain why those subtleties exist in these regional wise, and what are those kind of a buying behavior stuff that you are seeing that you would like to highlight before we start getting into a conversation very specific about, you know, what organizations need to do?
Right, okay. So in terms of Indonesia, when I arrived here, actually 8 years ago, the e-commerce market was just booming. It was just opening up, largely due to the marketplaces coming in and setting up, as well as the aggregators. So there was one key aggregator which really drove the online business to where it is today in the country. So that is why I always believe e-commerce is like, just like Niranka said, it's a habit creation. So you have to create that habit, and that's how you convert the customer from offline to online. So much so, Indonesia currently is a largest mobile e-commerce market in Southeast Asia. That is because every single person has a smartphone now in this country. Some people actually have 2 phones. So that kind of need requires proper online facilities as well. So in terms of this entire pandemic, that was the demand from customers was there for online. And that's where the gap was, because certain brands were not ready or prepared to have their online channel opened up. So there was a big gap what we saw at that time. So in terms of even in other Southeast Asian markets, or even in South Asia, like say for instance, even India, or even in Sri Lanka, irrespective of how small the market is. Now, say for instance, India is also quite big on e-commerce. And something that they are now most markets in Asia are looking at is quick commerce. How fast can you deliver the product to the customer? So they are more focusing on quick commerce and mobile commerce. So I think that is where the trend is going now. And there is a lot of development in this area as well. And it's not only e-commerce, we can see a huge demand for gaming as well. This became such a big demand because of the work from home culture, and people were stuck at home. So there is a lot of innovation happening as well. So this pandemic, even though there were lots of negativities that were involved with this pandemic, there are also some positivities, especially for the businesses, that they could take note of and take action.
Very interesting. I think you mentioned something very interesting. I just jotted it down, called habit creation. I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because I think that's something that I'm sure that Niranka would also like to talk about a bit more, because ultimately the success belongs there. So success will be there. Nilusha, let me come back to you for a little bit more. I think I'm glad that you gave me the disclaimer, because I didn't have to say it. The conversion from from non-believer to potentially be a believer. The question I wanted to ask you is that I think when your offline business would have been doing very, very well to a point where your online business was, I mean, I think going to Kiehl's is an experience even I enjoy, and I do that. So buying it online is a more like I don't really want to do it if I get the chance, right? But I think the post lockdown drove it for people to start, obviously as a result of not having an option to buy online. I think, how are you managing this entire kind of a quick shifts that happen from, getting very minimum number of orders, probably for getting humongous amount of orders in one day, inventory management, because you all have 100 plus, outlets in the country. Would you like to talk a little bit about, the really building that, and also what are your 3 key priorities around that?
Sure, Rohan. So before I actually get to answering what those 3 key priorities are, I think Rohan also gave a little bit of context. So let me expound on a little bit of what we faced. E-commerce prior to the pandemic, particularly around grocery retailing, was a very small market share. There wasn't that many activations or activity happening in that space. So we too at Kiehl's had a basic platform that was kind of just right for the purpose it was set up for, primarily to enable and provide convenience to Sri Lankans who are living overseas to be able to send goods to their loved ones. And that was the start, right, in the early 2000s. And it worked for the customers, it worked for the business, for the volumes that we were getting. And just to again explain a little bit of those volumes, what we are seeing, this is not even during a lockdown. Pre-pandemic, monthly volumes went up 5 times, and it's now happening a day. So it's such a shift within a 1.5-year period, right? When things began to kind of unravel really fast, we did not anticipate what would really happen. We didn't know that stores would close. We didn't know that people will entirely shift to an online shopping platform overnight either. So we had some serious issues to deal with. We had to run at a really fast pace to kind of be able to deliver something to customers who were, trying really hard to source food and beverages for their families. So every lockdown since then, we've evolved, and we are still evolving. I don't think we've yet reached that end point. So if I focus on those 3 key priorities, and giving it a little bit of thought, I'd like to start with the number 1 priority being the customer. I think we spoke a little bit about this habit creation. It really starts with your understanding of who your customers are and who's out there as a potential market and what are they looking for. If you kind of have the right conversations at the right time with your customers and understand all that information flowing through to your business, that would be your first priority. For example, your customer care center would be a hotbed for consumer pain points. The feedback they leave after shopping or getting a delivery, to what your platform and the tools you've enabled it with itself is telling you, would really help you understand deeper what your customers are feeling as they shop with you. So that would be your number 1 priority in terms of really walking this journey as our consumers evolving with them. Evolving super fast also may not work because they're still shifting their habits and patterns. Second priority, I think, is an agile approach to technology and the platform that you have. I know this word agile is a little hacked, but I think it's the appropriate word to use. Simply, the reason I'm using that word is because I think you need to be able to flex your capacity up and down without being too restricted in terms of technology. That helps you also evolve along with the customer in terms of adding features or toning certain things down, and meeting the demand varieties. So I think that would be a second priority. And third and final, I think, would be the right skills and processes. There's this age-old saying, horses for courses, right? So you need to make sure you have the right people in the right positions to be able to deliver that consumer experience. whether it is internally or who you're working with. You also need to have some of those, all those good SLAs and SOPs in place, and ensure the sustainability of it as well. So those would be the 3 key priorities, Rohan.
Good stuff. Thanks, Nilusha. Really appreciate it. And I think with a little bit of exposure I have received over the last couple of months, I mean, I can absolutely vouch for I think I always said sometimes these retail operations are like the swans on a lake, where it looks very calm and nice in front when you go to the store and when you purchase, but just underneath the surface, you pedal like nothing just to stay afloat and keep things together. And the amount of resourcing and effort it takes. I think it's really interesting also that today we have the panelists where forgive me for the terminology I use here, but we are not like, we don't really have people representing pure digital play, so to speak, like where the entire discovery process all the way to decision making, all the way to buying purses, and the fulfillment can happen digitally, like music or a book or whatever. Whereas you all bring in a very different, which is also the vast variety or vast kind of a majority of the market, where people buy online but still have a lot of orientation towards wanting to visit the stores and have that experience and stuff like that. So Niranka, I'm coming to you. Some interesting points about habit creation. There's some interesting points about the 3 priorities about customer, agility, and the team that Nilusha spoke about. Of course, a lot of people may not know Niranka is one of the top 20 digital marketers in the world, had worked with so many different international brands, etc. So he basically have worked with, even now currently work with multiple brands in the country. What are your experience have been from the almost like the other side, working with organizations and working with customers, especially who are trying to adapt to this environment? Would you like to give some examples about what organizations are doing right, doing well, or doing badly about managing these fluctuations that Nilusha also spoke about?
Sure. So I'll actually give you 2 examples as a consumer, right? And the reality is, as Nilusha also mentioned, in any business, you think of the customer first, and then you look at, as an organization, how do you cater to those customer needs, right? So I had an experience ordering groceries, and basically it was scheduled to come on a particular date, right? But it actually came one day before, right? So usually this would be something that you'd be happy about. But in this case, I was actually in the middle of presenting to the board of one of Sri Lanka's largest companies, right? And the delivery gentleman called me 3 times. I kept cutting the line because I was on camera talking. And then finally my phone was like ringing off hook, and I finally answered, and it was this person who was trying to find my house and asking for directions. So within a span of 15 minutes, he called me 9 times while I was doing a presentation, right? And I actually went to pick up my groceries with my laptop in hand, right, while still presenting a digital strategy, and directing somebody to go and keep it over there, I'll pick it up, right? So the reality is we may not always have an optimum experience, because there are certain levels of maturity, like delivery tracking, delivery notifications, you have a customer notification saying expect this in 1 hour or something like that. You don't see a lot of Sri Lankan brands who have evolved to that aspect of the consumer journey. So when we talk about e-commerce, we talk about e-commerce as a process. It's not just the experience of the website loading fast and you adding something to the cart or whatever. It is from the transaction to the payment methods it supports, to the customer communication, after sales support, fulfillment. All of these need to come into place for us to holistically talk about an e-commerce experience. So this is just one example. The similar example was I had to send a birthday gift, right? And there was this particular store which I knew this person liked. I spent so forgetting the e-commerce experience, the site took ages to load, the filters didn't work, all that kind of stuff, which are all things that we would forgive when we are stuck.
Yeah.
Right. You'd
Yes.
wait and wait and wait because you have no other choice. Right. So I basically finished adding everything to cart, and they had a payment gateway checkout option, and they had a checkout via WhatsApp. Right. And I thought, okay, interesting, because I've been struggling with this site for the last 15 minutes to, refresh my cart and all that kind of stuff. I'll probably check out through WhatsApp, right? I thought that'll be a faster thing. I'll do a back transfer and we'll be done. So this also is basically perspective on e-commerce, is that it doesn't necessarily mean a credit card. It doesn't necessarily mean a particular experience. If you have an Instagram page and you're accepting orders through DMs, right, that is also an e-commerce experience, right? So in this scenario, what happened was they took 3 hours to reply to that WhatsApp message, right? And after they finally replied, it took another 45 minutes to get back to me saying this order is confirmed, or this one can't be returned because this falls under this particular whatever, right? So actually, while that process was going, I was hopping on other sites, and I actually found another site that I thought might be better, because they had a 1-day delivery guarantee and all of that. So I actually didn't go ahead with my order. I ended up buying with somebody else completely, right?
Yeah.
So this is a context that more Sri Lankan brands really need to adopt and take to heart. When it comes to a store, when it comes to conversions at a store, if it's a boutique outlet standalone, you are probably dedicating 1 hour of your time just to get there, right? To find parking and get to that store. You have a specific purpose in mind, saying Saturday morning I'm going to spend going to this particular store, right? And your in-store conversion rate would be between 30 to 50 odd percent. If it's a boutique store, usually it's 50 odd percent, because now that you're there and you put all that effort come in there, you'll buy something. You don't want to leave empty handed, right? When it comes to maybe a shopping mall, right? Again, you have foot traffic coming because there's a food court, there's all these kinds of things, and you're walking by, you see there's a sale going on there, or that dress catches your eye. So actually, that is marketing, right? There is ongoing constant marketing to promote walk-ins, right? And when you walk into that store, given the efficiency of the salespeople and all of that, you will have a 20-30% conversion ratio there. But on e-commerce, you will be punished brutally for every one of those lapses. If the site is taking too long to load, if the checkout experience isn't great, you are going to get punished for all of that. And as we talked about creating habit, right? I continued shopping for my groceries from that particular store because I didn't have a choice. But as soon as the lockdowns were lifted and there was a store available a kilometer away from where I was, it was an easier experience for me just to park and shop my necessities in person, right? So we have to own the entire customer life cycle, including the post-purchase, after sales, how do we get them, how do we increase repeat purchases? All of that needs to be taken into context if we are looking at e-commerce success.
Nirank, I think the way you described it, I just felt, damn, that sounds like a lot of work, a lot of variables to manage on top of what we are currently doing and what we have to do as an organizations, right? Nilusha and Aruni, would you like to add something to what Niranka said? Do you guys agree, disagree? Agree to disagree? Right, for that, or
let me start. I think, Niranka, thank you for sharing that experience. I've heard so many of similar to a varying degree of how people have been inconvenienced. And you're very right. People are very brutal in terms of if there's even the slightest lapse in that journey or drop in service, obviously you will shift your attention or you will shop in person. And that also is a reflection of that experience and the brand that you want to create in that space. So that's why I was always saying you have to start listening to that customer, trying to understand what they want, why they are not shopping with you or why they are no longer shopping with you, to be able to fix some of those latent issues. Completely agree.
Good. Arune, I'm just coming to you because I have an interesting question I want to ask, and I think please welcome. I'd like to welcome even Nilusha and Niranka, both of you, to add something as well. So the reason why I'm asking this question is, when during the lockdown, there's always been this, we'll invest on digital. It seems to be where everybody is. And a lot of customers were forgiving. All of us were forgiving about, okay, it got delayed. This guy called me 9 times or 15 times, all of that. We were forgiving. Now we are again a little bit less forgiving, because now we can actually, as Niranka said, we can take the car and drive and walk and get stuff as well. So here's the situation. A lot of people, sometimes business leaders, when we talk to them, there is this assumption that things will go back to normal. We don't really have to pursue this. So Arune, I'll just ask your question on this, and then maybe I'll open up for others to give their inputs as well. There's a chance that investment for digital and what you all have been doing for the last maybe 6 months, 1 year time of period, the momentum can be lost because of, again, you're going back to the way that the operations are running to support this thing. I'm sure the employees have moved. You have to hire employees. There's a lot of back end work now to restart even your same operation you had before. Forget digital. How do you think the organizations are looking at digital? Do you think it is a meaningful pursuit that people would want to continue to invest and do it? Does the assumption is that, post lockdown, if earlier it was 5%, now will it set at 15%, 20% at a higher rate? What do you think the brands are doing, and what do you think they are seeing the market in this next phase 20 leading up to 2022?
Right. So this is a very broad question, Rohan. So first and foremost, I think it all depends on the type of business, right? Certain businesses, you don't have a choice, but you have to be on e-commerce. Again, looking at the context of where we are heading, even if it's post-pandemic, we never know whether things will get bad again. So in certain large organizations, they have to be on e-commerce, and I guess they will invest wisely on this. And also looking at global brands, they are already on e-commerce. Even in Sri Lanka, where the global brands are, like the food brands, for instance, McDonald's, Pizza Hut, they are already using e-commerce platforms even before the pandemic. So they see the growth in this. Whereas for smaller brands, yes, it will become a challenge for smaller organizations because they have to invest quite a lot for an e-commerce channel end to end, just like Niranka very correctly explained. It's not just the site UI and UX. You have to make sure that your customer service is set up. And I completely agree with what Nilusha said. You have to have the correct people to manage your e-commerce business. It's not, and this is something again I've seen in some of the Sri Lankan organizations. They work in silos, like the IT team will develop the platform and the marketing team will promote it. So there is, and then marketing only will understand what the customers are saying, but it doesn't go down to the IT team who is managing the platform. So then there is a bit of a gap there in communication, and that's where the problem starts. So there has to be a middle man or a middle team who will drive this business, because you can't work in silos for something like an e-commerce platform. So that is another aspect that I want to touch on. But otherwise, yes, of course. And also, even before this pandemic, The brands who were on e-commerce, who were using e-commerce platforms, they know, or they rather knew, that there is constant investment that is required if you're on a tech background, right? I mean, if you want to implement tech, because technology changes every year, things change, things new happen, like, and so with that, there is an investment that is required for it. But as an organization, are you going to do that is definitely up to the organization. And sometimes it is a challenge for heads of marketing to convince the board at the board level to invest, or the management team to invest. And if they are, again, very traditional, and if they think in traditional terms, it is quite a challenge, especially if it's a local brand.
How is it going for you, Aruni? Do you think you are being successful in getting the approvals to move forward?
Yes, fortunately, since I work for a global brand, we actually in Indonesia, I work for the franchise. So we have actually, and we get a lot of learnings from other markets as well for the brand. And that is again something that I would like to touch here in Sri Lanka, because of the market size. Most of all, the Sri Lankan brands completely only focus on very, very short term. They don't tend to think of the long term aspect. And this is personally, this is what happened to me too, actually. Once I left the country, my eyes opened because I saw how much of opportunities there are, even for e-commerce, and if we can grow it, where we could take the business. So I think for Sri Lankans also, it is very important to look outside and get ideas, learn from other businesses and other key brands that are doing things to support, and see how it can support your business.
Good. Excellent. I mean, I'd love to hear someone challenging you on that. But let's see how it goes. I think we got a question for you also, Aruni. Let me come back to you on that. But Nilusha, I think, there's some interesting stuff that Aruni said about, Sri Lanka market and the exposure, that how it translates, and global brands anyway has a focus, and they are anyway driving towards that. Just maybe COVID would have experienced it. I think maybe your experience is slightly different hearing your first answer. But I think very interesting question I wanted to ask you is that, this hype, how do you maintain this hype that we say? I'm sorry to say it's a hype. I'm a firm believer of digital, so I wouldn't call it hype. I would think it's the evolution, And what I really want to ask is that there's a lot of conversation about omni-channel and being able to do omni-channel work to make sure that you maintain the momentum post COVID. What would you like to I would like to hear your thoughts about these areas, and like Niranka also to come in if it's needed. Yeah, Nilusha, over to you.
Sure. I think if last year has taught us anything, it is that things can change in an instant, right? Changes that we thought we had years to prepare for, or things that we thought will never ever change forever, has literally changed. And it's still very much evolving landscape, because like Aruni said, I don't know whether we can yet say post-pandemic. We are possibly still going through several phases of it, and people are still evolving, and therefore the opportunity is available as well, right? Research also says that customers who used to visit brick and mortar stores visit them less often post lockdowns due to various concerns like safety and trying to avoid crowds and things like that. So that's coming out through research. People who used to buy certain products inside the shop are now shopping for those same products online. So you see different kinds of shifts happening as well. Interestingly, I think e-commerce became from being a perpetual priority in most brands' strategy canvas to like literally, I need it now, like a immediate lifeline almost. I think Niranka also was talking about how sometimes from an agency perspective, clients say need it now, not needed now kind of situation. But I think that shift for most brands really happened due to the pandemic as well. I think from a consumer perspective, certain behaviors might revert back to what it was pre-pandemic, depending on some macroeconomic variables. Some have changed and some will still evolve. Trying to answer that question, and I think Aruni brought the conversation to a really nice point where she was talking about technology. I feel as a retailer and a brand, the question that we must ask ourselves before we plan out that omni-channel journey is not so much what technology or investment do I want to make, but I think one step before that, we need to ask, what experience do I want to offer my customer? And in trying to answer that, I think we can, you bring your brand in, what your brand stands for. And with that, then you answer the question of what technology, what investments. And with that case, you try to kind of convince your business as to how you want to go about it in the next couple of years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Nilusha, I think you touched upon interesting. So, and I think this is going to segue into an important question I wanted to ask and connecting a couple of answers that I received before. You spoke about omnichannel. Niranka, you spoke at the previous time about this multiple platform through WhatsApp and all that. Right. And I think one of the important things I wanted to ask is that, we are seeing new platforms being built almost in a weekly basis. Now we are talking about the metaverse, right? So we're not going to discuss that because that's a completely different podcast altogether. So there is this ways that people want to engage. Nilusha, you spoke about experiences, very important, right? People are experiencing brands and people are experiencing transactions in a very different ways. So the question I wanted to ask you, Niranka, I know you are a TikToker. Right? I'm getting there. I'm not there yet, but I'll get there. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is that, these things like this TikTok and all these platforms, right? Being able to be engaged with your customers in these platforms, I'm pretty sure that it helps your brand. But does it really help us? Because these are very significant investments if you want to do TikTok or Instagram or Facebook and all that. And I think the transactions are moving away from just purely from your website as well. But does it really make sense, especially in the post-COVID where people are looking for different experience? And how do you really think a brand and organization should really adapt to those? Would you like to share some ideas around that?
Sure. I think the first thing, Rohan, is to clarify, I'm not a TikToker, I'm a TikTok advocate. Right?
Oh, sorry, I apologize. I want to be a TikToker. I wanted to be a TikToker.
I have one video of my dog up, which is the extent. So I think, okay, so I've been doing this for 18 years and I've had quite a few permutations of this conversation, right? I can remember having to justify to a chairman that the website was more expensive than a full page ad on the Sunday Times, right? And this question on TikTok is essentially the same, right? We as marketers, what we advocate is go where the customer is, right? And tomorrow there might be something else out there, day after it could be something else, right? So at the moment, from a global perspective and the Sri Lankan context also, TikTok is blowing up, right? Partly because the algorithm is fantastic, and the second is this is potentially the first time that video content was made so readily accessible and digestible, right? And we are seeing with these platforms, people that we trust, people that we follow, brands that we follow, talking to us specifically from a lifestyle perspective and sometimes from a brand perspective as well, right? So there is a person that you follow, that person is saying, if you want to get this look, right, this is where I bought that dress, go and check out that shop, right? And we basically aspire to that lifestyle. We have a certain amount of trust that we build because they speak to us and it resonates with us. So we go ahead or we take that into consideration. So the conversation on TikTok is not this alien platform kind of thing, or should TikTok be part of my marketing campaign right now, or whatever. The question is simple: where is my consumer? Has my consumer moved on to a platform like this? Do I have potential to engage with my consumer now on this platform? And can that be a tangible return for me as a brand? Then, of course, we need to go ahead. But one thing I do advocate to most brands is that working with an agency and all that is great, but there needs to be, of course, ownership at the brand level. And all of these require a lot of investment in terms of time and resources and all of that, right? So the worst thing you could do is to get on all of these haphazardly because it's trending. Somebody says we've got to be on TikTok, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I think Niranka, your network. Sorry, Nirang, you go back about 5 seconds. I think your screen froze for 5 seconds. I think you were talking about, don't get into it just because someone says it's cool to get onto it.
Yeah, basically you need to look at your own bandwidth and your potential to execute. So a shotgun approach without doing any platform correctly is kind of like the worst thing, right? So do get on TikTok if you have the capability to create content for TikTok and you have the your audience is on TikTok and you believe you can connect the two.
But aren't you giving a counter intuitive kind of an answer where a lot of people say get on there, figure it out, and be the first to type of a thing? Is it
definitely you can get on it, figure it out,
yeah,
and all of that, but then success comes in consistency, right? So this is usually the biggest
yeah,
problem we have as an agency, because what you benchmark is that 1 in a million chance that went viral and suddenly that business went from $100 a week to $1 million because that one video blew up or that one article or picture became a meme, right? And suddenly everybody is rushing to it, right? So there is a million brands for every one brand that goes viral, right? Behind the scenes, slogging through it day to day, right? So for me, do get on every platform to believe your customer is on, but get on it only if you can consistently follow through and maintain your presence properly on each of those platforms.
Good advice. So I'll just take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. I would open it out for all 3 of you, and you all can answer, even though one question have come very specifically for Aruni, and the second question is more a generic question. So let me just give the question, Aruni, maybe to you. The question I come from saying, what has been the most challenging customer experience related issues you're facing as part of e-commerce management in replicating the same store experience online? So would you like to take that question? Do you have a challenge or?
Yes, of course, many challenges. I'm not saying that just because I'm living elsewhere and handling a global brand, everything is smooth. No, definitely not. There are many challenges that we face on a daily basis. And also the fact is, in Indonesia, the customer is very digital savvy. So since they are so used to ordering online, so we have to be seen and giving them the perfect experience. If we don't give them the perfect experience, then of course they complain. So that is the biggest challenge we face, because the consumer here is very educated in terms of online ordering. So we can't, as a brand, we can't even bluff. Because they know, so there are other brands who deliver, and we have to come to that, or even supersede that kind of service that is offered. And again, it's not only just the technology part. I think Nilusha touched on this as well. It all includes the customer service, because sometimes the customer service might give the wrong information, and then the customer gets angry. Or it could be even the last mile, the shipping part, where the shipment is delayed, the delivery is delayed, and then the customer again has a bad experience. So it's not, sometimes when we say e-commerce, all our focus is just on the user experience of the technical aspect of it, and we completely disregard the rest of it, which is even more important, in my opinion, of the customer service and the last mile delivery. And just touching on what Niranka said, I think he pointed out an important aspect, which I also agree on. Most of the time, businesses are like organizations or the management, they see another brand doing well on a certain platform, and then they want to do the same thing without having any understanding how it will impact their brand. So I think it's important, while it's important to look at what the competitors are doing, it is also important to understand where your customer base is. Because sometimes if you see now, most of the brands who are using e-commerce might have some experience already to understand where the customer is. Are they coming through the desktop site, or are they using the mobile app, if you have a mobile app? If they're using the mobile web more and instead of the app, that means you have a problem with your mobile app. So either you focus on giving them a seamless experience through your desktop and the mobile web instead of focusing on the mobile app. So see where your customer is and try to give a better experience.
Excellent. Thanks, Aruni. There's an important question. I think Nilusha and Aruni, both of you are suited, and I think Niranka could also chip in here. The question is, how important is the use of native languages to maintain in the momentum for e-commerce? Or because I know that we always resort to e-commerce when it comes to English because of the ease of execution, ease of setting up, ease of deployment, etc. But Nilusha and Aruni, have you all seen much more uptake on the native languages? I myself have experienced that on video content, native language has a lot more momentum, more than an English language. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think that's one opportunity that we've not yet gotten into, but I think there is definitely potential there if we are able to get into that. Like you said, Rohan, there's so much more engagement when there is content and video content in native languages. Based on some of the consumer queries coming through, particularly during the lockdown, you see so many people of different walks of life, even sending a basic question like, how can I shop online? And there is still a market there that we have to walk through, and who might not be able to navigate through what we've created, partially because it may not be intuitive also, but also because of language issues. So I think it's super important.
Yes. Just to add to that, Rohan, of course, I agree with Nilusha, and in Indonesia, it is English is barely spoken here. It's a local language that is largely spoken. So if we don't cater in the local language, then definitely we are at a massive disadvantage. And in fact, when H&M launched the e-commerce platform here, we launched it in English because in English it was already available, and it's a matter of just integration and launching. So it was easier for us because of the global platforms which was available for us. But even though we launched it in English, we saw that we had to go native and cater to the locals. So we switched to the local language as well, and that has seen a massive growth.
All right, excellent. So I think we are entering into the last phase of our webinar, and I think there are a couple of other questions coming in. Let me just quickly take the question around the influencers, because Niranka, you touched upon it. Maybe you can lead, and I would love to hear Nilusha and Aruni's thoughts as well. Thoughts on selection of influencers, because I have seen Sri Lankan brands invest a lot of money on influencers and have used completely irrelevant personalities, which does not align with the brand. And how likely brands would use influencers to drive sales. Because when you gave me the answer, the first thing that came to my head was influencers. I didn't want to take it up because I thought our conversation move into a different area. But now there's a question. I mean, I think the idea is that boom and bust, right? I think influencer story had been there for generations. Niranka, what do you think about this particular thing? Maybe a crisp answer?
Sure. So influencers, as the question also kind of paraphrases, it's about the relevance to the brand and how
Right.
they translate to success. So we have had thousands of dollars in sales because of the right influencer. We've seen like a spike of a couple of million because the influencer did a video, right? So definitely I believe influencer marketing is of importance, and it is the right, it might be a right approach for certain brands. The question always comes is the popularity of that influencer, the value of their recommendation, all of it, how does it translate to your brand? And more often than not, what we see, brands we see with the largest followings, or rather influencers we see with the largest followings are maybe because they're doing awesome dances, or they're talking about workout regimens, all that kind of stuff, right? So do they directly translate into your brand, and is the recommendation that they give worthy of consideration by those they follow, are basically the two questions that you need to ask. So if I give you one very specific example, we had one of the top 20 travel bloggers in the UK write an article about a property here in Sri Lanka, and that translated into thousands of dollars worth of bookings, right? Whereas in some instances, we've seen brands go and pick influencer who does the latest trend and the dance and whatever, right? While good for numbers, translates to less than 100 people coming onto the website and basically zero sales. So picking an influencer, I think, is the hardest part for a brand, but influencer marketing definitely adds value overall.
Interesting. Right. So I think we don't want to, as I said, I want to stay focused to the e-commerce boom and bust and managing. Nilusha, I'm going to ask you a interesting question. I might put you on the spot here. Aruni in the previous spoke a little bit about the IT team and the marketing team. How do you think that need to be managed? I'm not going to ask specific to your organization. I wanted to ask you, like, what are you as a leadership team think and you all are doing in terms of making sure that that gap doesn't get addressed? Number one, part A. Part B part of the question I want to ask you, especially about this e-commerce part of it, is that in Sri Lanka, modern trade footprint is rather small. I think that a lot of people know, I think general trade is still almost 80+% of the market is general trade, right? So I think in that context, I know that even principals like the Unilevers, everyone prefer to work with modern trade because there's a lot more accountability, a lot more traction, a lot of more monitoring, a lot of different things they can execute more than what they can't do with general trade. How is that kind of helping to grow the business, the entire market piece altogether? And what do you think is you all are thinking about doing in order for us to help your business online as well? So there are two parts of it. I know it's a loaded question. I apologize, but
Okay.
over to you, Nilusha.
So let me answer it also in two parts and maybe take the first question.
Right.
The siloed mentality definitely does exist. And part of that depends on the level of priority that you give to e-commerce within your business. And I think going through what we went through over the last 1.5 years, you realize that is no longer the way to look at it, because it has to cut across the entire business to be able to give that seamless experience. So I think part of it is top down, understanding and identifying that it requires a cross-functional approach, and then marketing teams stepping out of their shoes to also understand the role of IT, and IT trying to also understand what we need to deliver to the customer. And it's that cohesive cross-functional working that we need to get into to be able to deliver that experience. It's not easy, and I think most businesses and brands approach it the way Aruni said, but I think it's a journey, and glad to say that we are well on our way to kind of get into that journey. Answering your question around the potential in the digital transformation in Sri Lanka, I think there's so much. The fact that the e-commerce space is already getting crowded, and like you said, modern trade is only 15 to 20% in Sri Lanka, just shows the sheer potential. there will be some amount of organic growth that will come through naturally as we go in and out of lockdowns. The level that we plateau at kind of keeps increasing, so there will be organic growth. Certain inorganic growth will come through various third-party collaborations and tie-ins for sure. But again, for all this entire growth journey, I think the starting point should always be the customer and matching that opportunity with the right consumer insight.
And so, very good. Thank you, Anilusha. And I'm sorry I put you on the spot. So I think there's a question from the audience.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just to jump in, I have a couple of things, if I may take a minute.
Yeah.
There was a question asking about how do you replicate an offline experience online, and I feel that's fundamentally the wrong approach, because that is potentially where you might get stuck, right? Each channel has unique capabilities, and the channel strategy should be ideally devised with that channel in mind, right? So very simple example is in fashion, you have a lot of broken inventory, right? You have this particular size of this particular dress left aside, right? Now, if you take an e-commerce process, you can have a one-day flash sale for those kinds of items, and you have no infrastructure cost. You may have just a bit of marketing spend. Whereas if you were going to do that at a store level, you would have significant costs in addition to the marketing, from the in-store branding to inventory management to all of those kinds of things. So the channel itself has specifics that you should keep in mind, and trying to basically replicate what you deliver offline online might introduce unnecessary barriers that may prevent some level of adoption for e-commerce. And the second point I want to mention is when we talked about languages and all of that, is something fundamentally we see is we always look outside and say, hey, those guys are doing fantastically, let's just emulate that in Sri Lanka, right? While yes, there is certainly a lot of things that we could learn, it sometimes may not make sense to benchmark Amazon, right? $1 trillion company, when you have a 1 million rupee budget and 10 products to sell, right? So sometimes this being taken out of context again introduces 10 different problems on how you want to portray and take your business online, because you're not actually thinking about your customer, you're trying to emulate a success model somewhere else, right? So that is where I think you need to rely on your own data, do your own market research, and be customer centric based on the customer that you are going to serve.
Interesting.
So, sorry for hijacking, want to mention.
No, please go ahead and hijack. I love it. So I think I have an interesting customer question from our audience. Shihan had asked a question, so I thought I'll ask that. And I think maybe, Aruni, you're probably also in an interesting place to advise, because you have seen Sri Lanka as well as now we are in Indonesia, and you handle a global brand as well. But love to hear from Nilusha and Niranka as well. What would you recommend to take e-commerce global, brand global? So Niranka spoke a little bit about, how it is not suited to bring what is outside just straight into the Sri Lanka market, because just entire context, scale, everything is so different, completely in agreement. But obviously we all aspire to build our brand outside. How do we build it? I'm sure that, if it's possible, could we not deliver it in other countries? So what are your ideas about building something outside of Sri Lanka or from Sri Lanka that can appeal to a large audience? What are the challenges you're faced with? Why hasn't a lot of people been successful in doing that? Any thoughts? I'll start with Aruni. Aruni, would you like to just maybe give some ideas around that?
Yes, I think before you, any business, before you think of approaching a global aspect, you have to think of catering to the locals first. And once you get your local business running and moving well, I'm not going to say that it will be 100% perfect, but you have to have an understanding of your local customer base. Of course, having a global idea, I mean, going global is great. I think most businesses do aspire that, but it is very challenging. It's not easy because your base will be Sri Lanka and you're going to sell it to an outsider who's living outside of Sri Lanka. So you need to not only just get the system, I mean, your platform correct, or platform seamless, you need to look at your shipping methods, your payment gateways. You need to ensure that the customer who's outside, now say for instance, if I'm living in Indonesia and I want to order something from a Sri Lankan website, I myself have faced a lot of problems where, like, you know, I have to have a local account to pay for the product. And delivery, of course, currently anything what I buy from a Sri Lankan site is only limiting to delivery within Sri Lanka, right? So there are lots of restrictions, and then you need to look at how you can go past those. And it's not, again, then you need to have a customer service that can also respond to international customers. So it's not only just the platform, it's a huge investment cost. I'm not trying to discourage anyone, but it's something that a business needs to think through very carefully.
Okay. So Nilusha, you want, or Niranka, want to add something? Because this is something all of us would love to see, right? I mean, we would love to see more Sri Lankan companies having a global footprint, building a global brand, doing stuff as well. So any thoughts from either one of you? Or both of you?
The reality is the sales pitch versus the actual execution, right? So you can click on a Facebook ad and boost it somewhere in the UK, right? All that's great, but as Aruni also mentioned, there is investment on how to actually get the product out there, right? One of the biggest things Sri Lankan brands have as a challenge is the shipping cost is larger than the actual cost of the product, right?
Yeah.
So if you are going to be serious about global distribution, then you need to look at 3PL services, somebody who can warehouse maybe this in the source market so that you can manage your shipping costs. There are a lot of investments, strategic thinking and execution that needs to come into place before you are ready to sell online, right? Then definitely, how are you going to handle a refund, right? How are you going to handle a return? These are all questions you need to have answers to. They're completely doable, but we find that brands are ready to jump in merely because they can spend a marketing dollar or two in a particular market. So if I can show this product to somebody, we'll figure out the rest. Is not a great way to go when you're thinking of a global strategy. The second is you really need to be realistic. And I gave this example at a recent session on travel. Post-pandemic or pre-pandemic rather, the investment in travel advertising in the UK was $13.9 billion, right? And you are basically competing for a share of voice in that space. And you are also trying to target a consumer who may be targeted from a million other companies. The UK government alone, if I'm not mistaken, spent 330,000 pounds on Brexit related advertising, right? So we have this challenge where brands come to us and say, we have $500 or we have $1,000, let's go to UK, right?
Yeah.
And when we talk about, okay, what is the investment we are going to make in awareness? How have we got our logistics sorted out? How can we build top of mind in this particular niche, right? Those are all conversations that sometimes haven't really gotten the answers that they deserve, because there is this misunderstanding that because you can run a campaign in any country, that automatically it means you can do e-commerce in any country, right? So fundamentally for us, it's about thinking of the entire process and having that infrastructure in place before you can actually start selling globally.
Interesting. Couple of more questions. I know we wanted to get into some interesting question, but I thought it's also important to get some of these questions. There's some very important question I want to ask, and I want to throw at all three of you, and I'm going to hold you all to give me an answer. Right? The two questions. But first question, I think it's a really important and a valid question. Discounts, right? If you look at a lot of organizations build their e-commerce around discounting, and online is used to like the discount platform for discounting. Messaging is about discounting. So the question is, even during lockdown, many retailers in Sri Lanka drove sales with discounts. Of course, this is not sustainable to grow e-commerce business. Do you believe that this will change, or the consumer expectation will continue to remain on discounts? Nilusha, I'll come to you first on that.
Sure. I think needless to say, discretionary spend is at all-time low and disposable income is affected. So obviously value for money is something customers are looking for. But if I am to take a view of whether discounts are more important than something else, I think it entirely depends on the your market strategy, right? Do you want to be seen as driving your core proposition as providing discounts and therefore attracting people, or is your brand and core proposition something else? So obviously for us, for a brand like Kiehl's, I think discounts is more of icing and cherry on the top, where we have to first deliver our brand and our core proposition through that service. Right. And discounting is just one of those strategies that we do to attract a different group of consumers.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people mistake it, and I think people have a lack of understanding probably that discounting is also a known way of doing it. I mean, it is not a substandard way of doing something, and for certain industries it is like everybody else does normal marketing. This is a strategy way forward as well. Aruni, what do you say about that?
Yes,
because you will have a different perspective.
No, not really. It's on the same lines. In terms of discounting, yes. What for H&M is, we focus on both full price as well as the discounted prices. And also in terms of discounting, again, we do not give discounts all the time, because we don't want the customer to be get used to a discounting kind of perspective when they come online. But what we also do is we drive more activities on online instead of offline. Sometimes we do omni activities, which is the same activity happens in the offline store as well as online. But then sometimes we do online only exclusive activities in the online platform. So that gives the customer also like a perspective where they can choose whether they want to go to the offline store, or if they come to online, they will get better activities or better discounts. But again, since we are a retail business and we have to look at our inventory. So whatever which we need to get rid of, we get rid of through discounting. But it again depends on the business, what type of business, what type of consumer you're catering to. So it all depends on that. But again, from my, sorry to interrupt, again, from my experience from the food industry, because I was part of the food brands as well, heavy discounting is sometimes can be detrimental to a brand, because then customers only come on that particular day, and that is something I do not encourage, because it can be a very it can be a bad impact to the brand in the long term.
That's great insight, Aruni. I've seen that somewhere recently as well, and we've been discussing this against doing that. Niranka, your last thoughts? I think we are running out of time. Maybe we can do closing remarks after that, and then wrap up the webinar. Niranka.
Sure. Yeah. So for me, discounting is a interruption method, right? It's that bold sticker that changes behavior, saying I need to come and check this out now, right? But discounting is not a sales strategy as such, because you can't afford to, as a brand, continuously discount unless you're basically like a Groupon or whatever running on the discount model. So it's usually what we recommend to brands is have a promotional strategy of monthly activities. There are items that you can potentially discount on because you, for example, want to get rid of stock or you have broken inventory. There is something like that. And you look at that as an interruption method that gets that attention and says, I need to go and check out this website right now. And we find more often than not, especially in the fashion retail section, the discount is what gets people onto the site, but their basket usually comprises of a lot of items that are not on discount because that's what potentially caught their eye, right? And a final thought on that, Rohan, we actually did a survey and we had 1,600 plus responses. 43% have actually said, so we were talking about conversion drivers, 43% have said free delivery is a major conversion driver for them. And second is cash on delivery, with 37% saying that's a major point for them. Surprisingly, number 3 is positive customer reviews, where only 12% has said that was the core driver for them.
Interesting. Very good. So, dear panelists, thank you so much for spending almost 75 minutes at the moment. So I want to move into the closing remarks. And I learned a lot. So it's been fascinating discussion. I wish we actually had a little bit more time. I want to part ways with, I'm going to ask 2 questions and then your closing remarks. So please make sure you answer those 2 questions and then your closing remarks, if at all. First question, I think, Nilusha, we'll start with you because I think probably someone we both know have asked a question asking what are the single most, so for question 1 to all 3 of you, is the single most important competencies required for digital marketeer to grow and sustain the business? The first question. Second one is, what are your key priorities for the digital growth of your e-commerce for the next 3 to 6 years? Next 3 to 6 months as an organization, what are you really focusing on? Third one would be your closing remarks. So first one is about competencies and skills. Second one is about your priorities for the next 3 to 6 months, short term, mid term. And last one, your closing remarks about the webinar, the topic, or anything for that matter.
Sure.
Nilusha?
So I think the single most important skill that a digital marketer needs is curiosity and a good understanding of the customer. Your technical skills about various platforms, all of that can be trained through. If you don't have a view of who your customer is, and understanding of that, and just being curious to be able to try new things, I think those 2 would be the most important skills for a digital marketer in my view. I'm sorry, your second question was the priorities.
3 to 6 months, what are your kind of things that you are really focusing on for digital specifically?
Okay, so I'm going to revert back to that previous answer that I gave. The customer getting house ready in terms of skills and processes, and making sure our tech is ready, right? And just to kind of wrap up, I think we agree and we discussed that there is so much potential in Sri Lanka, but whatever you do in this whole digital and e-commerce journey, it's really important, and I iterate the importance of keeping the customer at the heart of all of that you do. So you will make certain mistakes and there will be ups and downs, but as far as you have that customer in mind, you will get it right. And that's it, Rohan. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Nilusha. Aruni, same 3 thoughts from you. I'd love to hear, and skill sets, your focus for the next short term, and closing remarks.
Right. So in terms of the skill set, I also need to touch upon just what Nilusha said. It is definitely a curiosity. This is again coming from my own personal experience, because I was in marketing through and through. I was from the time I joined the workforce. And after I came to Indonesia only, my focus moved from marketing to e-commerce. And so I had to learn everything from scratch. Because when I was in Sri Lanka, I didn't handle any e-commerce platforms. It was purely just social media marketing and the usual things. So when I came here, I had to build with the developer team and the technical team the sites required for the brand. So that's where I learned, and that curiosity really helped me a lot, because I was looking at what other brands were doing. I was looking at what the global brands were doing. I was looking at the competitor brands were doing, and I was learning. And as well as I was learning about the customer. What does the customer want? So that is very important if you are thinking of being in digital or in an e-commerce industry. Be curious and be open. Don't limit your focus. Don't limit your knowledge, because something like digital, it changes every day. A few years back, Facebook was number one. Then now it's TikTok. So things keep changing. We don't know what will happen next year. So you can't know. I don't think anyone who's working in digital or e-commerce can ever say that I know everything. So even I don't know everything. So obviously it's a learning process. Then in terms of the key priorities, I can't divulge all my organization's priorities, what I have listed, but
whatever you could.
Yeah, but the focus, of course, remains with the customer. Everything that we do is basically it's evolved around the customer, what the customer requirements are. In fact, today morning I had a meeting with the management as well, and even in there we are looking at from which, because Indonesia is such a vast area. It's a huge country, huge population. So we are looking at from where our customers are coming from, what are their feedback is, and then to give them the solution based on their wants and needs is something that we are looking at as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aruni. Niranka, over to you.
So for me, it's continuous learning, right? So when I first worked on my first digital campaign, Facebook didn't exist, and now 18 years later, a little less hair. Now I have to learn how TikTok works.
Little less magic words here.
Right. So it's about continuous learning, as everyone mentioned, the technical skills you can acquire, but how do you keep pushing the envelope is basically the fundamental, I would say, definition of what a digital marketer is today. When it comes to the goals, obviously not speaking from agency perspective, but what I would recommend to brands is that you potentially acquired a lot of customers during the lockdown process. You should ideally focus on how to build repeat purchase behavior with those one-time customers that you acquired during the last year and a half. So whether it's an emailer offering them a discount for a second time purchase or whatever it is, bring them back to your ecosystem, and that would give you a consistent way to build your numbers.
Excellent. Thank you. I mean, it's amazing. I love the word curiosity. Nilusha, thanks for bringing that up. I actually had one word in my life that I've always been very fascinated with, which is called imagination. Imagine. I think now I'm going to add curiosity also into that. And thank you so much. So thank you, everyone. I think we had some very interesting audience engagements. We had people on Facebook Live and also watching this. So thank you very much for joining us. And I hope that last 1 hour, 20 minutes or so would have been meaningful to you, and it kind of helped you. As I said, all 3 of these panelists are available on LinkedIn. Please reach out, connect. And if you want to inquire furthermore, please go ahead and do that. I would like to thank Antara Solutions team for putting this together. Fascinating. Thank you again, guys. So much respect and for the work you guys do with the brands and also the work being a creative performance agency. Niranka, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. Aruni, I think it's 1.5 hour time difference. I always get confused. So really appreciate joining us. I know that you had a couple of very important meetings before this, so thank you. Nilusha, I'm on a first-hand experience, know how hectic it gets for you when the stores opening up, everything. So really grateful. Thank you, and I hope this had helped some people to do better. And if that happened, I think we have accomplished what we set out to do at the beginning of this webinar. Keep an eye on for the next webinar. We might focus on some very interesting areas going forward. Keep looking into this space, and we hope to have a webinar every month. So thank you very much, dear panelists. Thank you very much for joining. And with that, we'll wrap up the session for today. Thank you. Take care and stay safe. Stay blessed.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rohan. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys.